The glass doors whispered open, cool air spilling out onto the sidewalk like a hush in a cathedral. Morning sunlight spilled across polished marble tiles, reflecting off the hoods of machines worth more than most homes. It was 9:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the Ferrari dealership in Palo Alto was already alive with quiet precision, like a watch ticking behind glass. A receptionist in crimson lipstick glanced up, her expression polite, bored, already measuring who walked in. A man in pressed slacks and a Rolex, or another camera-happy teen with dreams bigger than his bank account. She barely reacted when the old man walked through the door. He was alone, no appointment, no entourage, no pretense. His boots, soft, faded leather, muffled as he stepped onto the marble. They didn't match the room. Neither did his jacket, brown canvas, worn at the cuffs, like something pulled from a storybook about hard winters and harder men. A trucker's hat sat atop his silver hair, a threadbare patch over the brim that simply read, Delta Company, 1971. He paused just inside the entrance. Not because he was lost. He wasn't. He simply stood still, eyes roaming the floor like he was walking into a memory instead of a showroom. Across the room, behind a curved counter made of carbon fiber and Italian leather, Samantha Blake glanced up from her iPad. She was 28, sharp, stylish, born for high-end sales. Her heels clicked with precision when she walked, and she could smell a paycheck before it smiled. She eyed the old man with the casual detachment of someone used to wealth that spoke in silent codes, tailored cuffs, brushed titanium watches, and clean-shaven jaws. This man carried none of those. Just calloused hands, a limp in his left leg, and eyes that had seen something far older than Ferrari. He took 3 more steps in, and stopped next to a Ferrari 812 Superfast in Corsa Red. His hand reached out, not touching, but hovering over the hood, like he knew the rules, like he respected the machine. Samantha gave it a beat, then crossed the room, her walk practiced, confident, her smile already in place. "Good morning," she said, crisp, polite. "Welcome to Ferrari. Can I help you?" The man turned toward her. His face was weathered but calm, eyes blue, not cloudy with age, but sharp, watching everything. When he smiled, it was small, almost apologetic. "Just looking," he said. Samantha's smile thinned the way a blade does when sharpened. She motioned slightly toward the front of the dealership. "Well, we don't typically allow walk-ins to handle the display cars without an appointment, but you're welcome to browse." The word browse hung in the air like a closed door. He nodded once, hands resting quietly at his sides. He didn't ask questions, didn't push. "Appreciate it," he said simply. She stood for a moment longer, waiting, either for him to pull out a phone and ask for a selfie or launch into a story about his first car being a Mustang. Instead, he just turned slightly, began to walk slowly past the lineup of automotive royalty, an SF-90 Spider, a Roma, a Daytona SP3, like a red dream frozen in motion. Each one passed in silence. Samantha watched him limp slightly, left knee stiff, and then turned back toward the front counter. There were actual clients arriving in the next hour. A man who looked like that didn't walk in to buy. He walked in to remember. Frank Delaney knew exactly where he was, and he knew exactly what she saw. An old man, out of place, browsing fantasies he couldn't afford. That was the thing about California money. It came dressed in youth, tech, and arrogance. It forgot what sacrifice looked like, what quiet power was. Frank didn't need her permission. He wasn't here for her. He moved along the row slowly, each step deliberate. He knew cars the way some men knew horses, machines with blood and thunder in their bones. When he paused beside a Ferrari Monza SP2, something in him sighed. He remembered that sound. Engines snarling like a beast just under the hood. This one, sleek, black as midnight, looked less like a car and more like a question. He read the placard beside it. The specs, the engine, the price. $1.7 million. He didn't blink. Across the showroom, Samantha was speaking to a younger couple, a tech consultant and his influencer girlfriend. They were doing what people did here, pretending they were exploring options, which was code for dreaming they could stretch their latest Series A funding into a down payment. She caught sight of Frank again, now leaning slightly over to peer into the side mirrors of a Ferrari F8 Tributo. He wasn't touching anything, but he was too close, too curious. She excused herself from the couple. "Let me grab you the performance package sheet," and walked back toward the man in the jacket. "Sir," she said, softer now but firm, "I'm going to ask that you please don't lean on the vehicles." Frank straightened with quiet dignity. "I wasn't leaning," he said, "just looking at the weld." Samantha blinked. "The weld?" He nodded toward the frame. Carbon monocoque construction. You can tell by how the panels flow into the line of the front suspension. That's not production line work. That's artisan hands. Most people miss it. Samantha's smile twitched. She didn't like being corrected, especially not by someone dressed like her grandfather. Well, we still ask guests not to stand so close, she said, voice thinner. These cars are delicate. Frank looked at her. Really looked. He wasn't angry, just disappointed. I understand. She was already turning to walk away when he added, You ever drive one? She turned back. Excuse me? A Ferrari, he said. Have you ever actually driven one? She gave a tight smile. Of course. We're trained to understand the performance packages. Not what I asked. She blinked. Caught? No, she admitted. Not personally. Frank nodded once. Then you don't know. That stopped her for a beat. Don't know what? What it feels like when a machine listens to your heartbeat. She stared at him for a moment too long, and then, like she was swatting away a mosquito, she said, Look, sir, these vehicles start at $250,000. If you're seriously interested in buying, I can get a sales rep. Otherwise, we ask that casual guests keep their distance. Her voice wasn't cruel, but it was cutting, and the word hung in the air like a blade. Guests. Frank gave her one long, quiet look. Then he nodded. I understand, and he turned toward the door. By the time he reached the sidewalk, the sun was warmer, and the streets were buzzing with delivery vans and electric scooters. He walked slowly, adjusting the brim of his cap, a quiet ghost vanishing into morning traffic. Back inside, Samantha returned to her desk and checked her messages. She'd already forgotten the man's name. She never knew it to begin with. 2 days later, a private jet cut through the clouds above Modena, Italy, a sharp silhouette against the dawn sky. Inside sat the same old man, same hat, same jacket, same silence. Only now there was a folder in his lap marked Acquisizione Riservata, Confidential, stamped in red, written in Italian. Underneath was a logo that hadn't changed in decades, the prancing black horse. Frank Delaney sat without speaking, his eyes out the window, watching vineyards roll beneath him like slow waves. It wasn't about the car. It was never about the car. It was about being underestimated. It was about how the world had started believing wealth had to wear designer clothes and speak in App Store IPOs. Frank didn't grow up with that. He grew up with pain, with silence, with survival, and every dollar he ever earned had been pulled from the teeth of war, oil, and blood. 1969, Vietnam. He was 21st Ranger qualified, embedded in a unit that didn't exist on paper. Delta Company, deep insertion, border runs, extraction missions no one talked about afterward. They dropped him into the jungle with 2 things, a silenced Car-15 and orders that changed mid-flight. He lost men, killed others, watched leaders make choices in 10 seconds that would haunt them for 50 years. When he came home, he brought the war with him, not in his luggage, in his spine, in his knees, in his dreams. No parade, no job offers, just silence. He sold tools from a van for 5 years, slept in the back of it sometimes, until he got tired of asking for permission. He built his first company with 2 things, debt and defiance. 1981, Texas. He founded Delaney Resources, a small-time energy contractor that installed pump jacks and serviced mid-range wells for companies too lazy to drill themselves. By 1988, he'd locked down contracts from Shell and BP. By 1995, he had 20 rigs of his own, and 4 men watching his back because people started disappearing over deals that went wrong in places without names. Frank played the long game. He stayed off magazine covers, kept his holdings private, bought out failing competitors in cash, made enemies quietly, and buried them in red tape and tax code warfare. He never married, never needed to. His empire wasn't something you held in your arms. It was something you commanded. 2020, Zurich. He sold everything. The rigs, the land leases, the consultancy firms with meaningless names and shell offices in Singapore. He liquidated at the top of the market, before the Green Revolution, before the world changed again. Frank walked away with $3.2 billion, clean, and no one knew his name, because Frank had one rule: real power doesn't beg to be seen. Now, in 2025, he was 77 years old, and still watching. He'd walked into that showroom to see if the world had changed. It hadn't. People still judged the value of a man by the cut of his suit, still made assumptions about strength based on speed, style, the shine of a watch. The girl, Samantha, wasn't cruel. She was a product, taught to see flash instead of force, youth instead of experience. She'd laughed in her head because he didn't look like Silicon Valley's idea of power. He didn't look like a TikTok founder or a crypto cowboy. He looked like someone the world left behind, which meant she had no idea she was standing in front of her future boss. The plane touched down in Maranello at 7:03 a.m. local time. Frank stepped out onto the tarmac where two black Alfa Romeo SUVs waited. He didn't smile, didn't wave. The men who greeted him were not politicians. They were shareholders, and they knew who he was. Ferrari SPA had gone through a quiet crisis, stock volatility, leadership disputes, a shift in EV strategy that put pressure on their legacy engineering pipeline. The media didn't know it, but behind the boardroom doors there were fractures, the kind only quiet capital could fix. Frank wasn't here to buy a car. He was here to buy the company, or at least enough of it to reshape it. He didn't care about branding, or social media reach, or influencer partnerships. He cared about machines, and the men who made them. He met with the CEO, not in a suit, just the same canvas jacket, same weathered face. He shook hands, laid out the terms. "Not looking for headlines," he said. "I want a seat at the table, the engineering table." The board resisted at first, until they saw the check, until they saw what came with the check. His private equity firm, a clean injection of $800 million, and control over the research division. Frank didn't flinch, didn't threaten, just sat and watched, and in the silence, they caved. He walked out owning 12% of Ferrari. Back in Palo Alto, Samantha Blake sat at her desk scrolling through her feed when the dealership's general manager walked in, looking rattled. "We're getting a visit today," he said. "Corporate." She arched a brow. "Why?" He didn't answer. 2 hours later, 3 black Ferraris pulled up outside. One of them parked directly in the fire lane, and Frank Delaney stepped out. He wasn't alone. The regional VP was with him, and a translator, and a photographer. Samantha stood frozen as the old man walked past her desk without a glance. The GM met him near the center of the showroom. "Mr. Delaney," he said quickly. "An honor." Frank nodded. He looked around slowly, eyes sweeping the room. Then he pointed. "That one," he said. "The Monza. Midnight black." The GM blinked. "Yes, sir. We can have it delivered to... I'll drive it off the lot." "Of course," the GM said. "But we'll need a signature." Frank turned to the photographer. "You ready?" The camera clicked once. He turned to the regional VP. "Have them send the final ownership papers to the office in Milan." "Yes, sir." Frank turned last to Samantha. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Because in that moment, she understood who he was. And worse, she realized who she wasn't. Frank stepped into the driver's seat. The Monza came alive, like thunder, and without a word, without a glance, he peeled out of the dealership, leaving behind only the smell of scorched asphalt, and a silence deeper than shame. The tires whispered across the Italian asphalt, like silk laced with steel. The Monza SP2, a symphony of carbon, fire, and blood, tore through the countryside under a sun too proud to hide. Frank didn't drive like a man showing off. He drove like a man returning home. Every curve of the road was familiar, though he hadn't lived here a day in his life. The leather of the wheel creaked softly under his grip. The engine roared, not for applause, but for remembrance. This wasn't joyriding. This was communion. With the machine, with his past, with everything they said he'd never be. Frank had always known that power doesn't live in words. It lives in the way you hold silence when they doubt you. It lives in the calm you keep while they laugh. It lives in your refusal to react. Power does not beg. It does not explain. It simply is. And on that long, winding road toward the Maranello Hills, Frank wasn't driving a car. He was driving a message. For the world. For the young. For every soft voice in a hard room. Here's the truth they don't teach you. If they can laugh at you, they will. If you dress wrong, speak soft, or seem out of place, they'll write you off. But that's the point. Let them. Because the minute they stop watching, you build. In the shadows. In silence. In pain. You build when no one claps. When no one offers help. When no one believes in you but the fire inside your ribs. You build with rejection. With betrayal. With nights so cold, you talk to ghosts for warmth. You build like a man preparing for war. And when the day finally comes, you don't return with explanations. You return with ownership papers. You return with the keys to the castle. You return with the deed to the empire they said you'd never enter. Samantha sat at her desk 3 days later. Same showroom. Same blazer. Same carefully rehearsed smile. Only now, something had changed. Everyone knew. Everyone had heard. Not just about the old man driving off in a Monza, but the memo from corporate. Effective immediately, Frank Delaney was now the largest private stakeholder in Ferrari. He had veto power over several product lines. He would be visiting the showroom quarterly. And, most importantly, he had handpicked 2 employees for personal mentorship. Samantha's name was not on that list, but she didn't complain, because sometimes, when you make a mistake so loud the world hears it, you don't get a second chance. You get a reminder that not all wealth wears gold. Some wears grit, some walks with a limp, some doesn't speak until the last move has already been made. The real lesson? Don't underestimate quiet men. Don't judge a legacy by its lack of noise. Don't assume a slow walk means an empty bank account. The most dangerous men in the room are never the ones trying to prove it. They're the ones watching you, measuring you, letting you talk just enough to hang yourself with your own assumptions. And when they strike, it's never loud. It's final. A month later, a new Monza SP2 sat in the showroom. This time, it was behind velvet rope, with a plaque dedicated to the silent ones, the builders, the men who don't speak, but move nations. Signed, Frank Delaney. So next time you see someone who doesn't fit the mold, don't laugh. Look closer, because behind those eyes might be a man who doesn't need to prove anything to you, because he already owns the ground you're standing on.